Hello and welcome back. So in the last episode we managed to get our room collection actors sorted so that we can now group together actors that are in a location or anything that walks into that location and collectively fade them in or out depending on if we want to see them or not. This could be, if a character is on the other side of them and we want to be able to see through, or if they're on a different floor and we don't want to see the floors above. This is what we're going to do. The first thing that we're going to do is add some fade logic to the environment actors that we've done up. In this case, our environment actors are BP wall. And if we go find the environment actor itself, we can see we have a couple things already included because we have in our class settings implemented the transparency settings interface. We have access to the isFaded function and the fade in and fade out events. So we're going to expand on this a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to first of all make a material instance, a dynamic material instance for the material so that we can adjust values on the fly. And to do that, we are going to begin play, drag out from that and say create dynamic material instance. And the parent, we want to select our static mesh. Oh, I got the wrong one. If I drag in static mesh first and drag out from that, create dynamic material instance. There we go. So now that we've got that, we can say source material is, what are we using for this? What we'll say is, because we don't know what material we're going to be using, let's just say get material so that we're always using the relevant material. And we're going to promote this to a variable, and we're just going to call this material instance, let's say MI for now. We can rename that to something more specific later on if we want to, but that should be that. If you have more materials on each object, you might have to repeat this process for the element index that the material is on. Although I could see that getting quite expensive with just creating loads of dynamic materials. It's already quite expensive for creating dynamic materials on every object that we want to do this on. So the less you need to do this on, the better. But now that we've got that, we can start adding in some logic for that. So let's first of all get a timeline. And the timeline we're going to call fader, and we're going to use this to control the alpha of the fade amount in the material itself. So what we can say is we can get MI material instance and set scalar parameter value. And if you remember the parameter name, if we find the material again, where did I put that? Materials, environment, mask. It's called fade amount. So let's do that. Let us get the environment actor, and the parameter name is fade amount. Now this value we need to connect to something inside the fader. We will connect, by the way, update to that set scalar parameter. If you double click on the timeline, it'll open it up, and we're going to add a track and say float track. Now the name we're going to give it is alpha, and that'll show up now here as an alpha track, which we can then plug straight into the value. As for the graph itself, let's say we don't want this to happen over 5 seconds. Let's say we want the fade to happen over half a second. So let's reduce the length down to 0.5. And we're going to add 2 points by holding shift and clicking on the graph. The first point we're going to say at time 0 and value 1. And the second point at time 0.5 and value 0. Now to bring it into scope so you can see everything, you can zoom to fit horizontal and zoom to fit vertical and zoom out just a little bit by scrolling. And we want to have a bit of a nicer graph than this. We don't want it to be a linear fade. Let's make it a curve by clicking on the first point and going auto, and that'll do an ease in out function. So it should look a bit smoother. And now that we've got that, We can plug fade out to play, because when we play it, it's going to go from 1 to 0. And fade in to reverse. Let's just swap those over. But now we need some logic to actually trigger the fade out, right? Where do we want this? We want to do this on the room collection. What we want to do here is we want to add a custom event called fade room. And this is what we're going to use to call those functions on the environment actors on every instance of them that we have in that area. Now, you might also want to add this onto characters if you want it to affect characters or any other object that you want that's not an environment actor, but you can do that in your own time. So on the room collection, we now have fade room, and what we're going to do is we're going to get a for each loop, and we're going to grab the static objects, plug that in, and once that's completed, we're going to do another for each loop. And do the same thing for the dynamic objects. So what we want to do there then is cast to environment actors. So we're making sure that everything here is an environment actor. Do we want to do that? No, we don't want to do that directly to the environment actor. We want to say, does implement interface? Because we're checking whether or not we've got the transparency interface on it, because this is really where our events are. So if it's there, we can say branch. And if true, we want to fade in. And actually, no. What we want to do is we want fade room to have an input of a Boolean that says B should fade, because we're going to be toggling this for both fading in and out, and we want to be able to, see whether or not the fade in or fade out should be playing. So we've got this bool here. Let's drag out, create a reroute node, just clean it up. And again. And we're going to plug this into another branch. Technically, you probably don't need this does implement interface, because if you call fade in on an actor that doesn't implement that interface, it's just not going to do anything. It's not going to crash or anything. It just won't, trigger anything, because it's sending a message to see if it has it or not and call it if it does. So yeah, I'll show you by just removing it that we can do that. But we're still calling the functions on that interface. So if we're saying should fade, we want to fade out. And if the should fade is false, we want to fade in. And we're just going to repeat that for our dynamic objects. So let's just plug that straight back in up there. So if we see what's going on, it's going to do all the static objects and fade in or out accordingly. And then once that's completed, it's going to go through all the dynamic objects and repeat the same logic. We could shrink this down into a function and make it a bit clearer, because I think having these two wires kind of makes it a little unclear, but we're going to leave that like that for now. Anyway, compile and save. Oh, of course, what do we need to reference? We need to reference the array element. So we will actually need to duplicate this. And loop body on a second, because we need these array elements to plug into these targets. And we need to plug the bool into there. And once we compile, those errors should go away. There we go. Let's clean this up a little bit, because this is a little messy. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just have one wire that kind of splits off. And that is that. Now what we want to do is find something to trigger fade room. So we're going through the hierarchy here, right? So we need something to fade the room, which then fades the objects themselves. And where we're going to do that is we're going to do that in the camera itself. We want to add some logic for checking if an environment, if a room collection is in the way of the camera. And if it is, then it triggers that logic. But to do that, we need to know A, whether a room collection is in the way, and B, if a room collection is no longer in the way, but previously was, because that's going to be how we figure out when we need to fade back in. And to do that, we're going to make 2 arrays down in the camera. We're going to say, this is probably going to be really awkwardly named, but we're going to call this rooms in the way. And we're going to make this not an actor array, a room collection. And if I right click, make that an array and add another variable and call this rooms previously in the way. Could definitely name those better, but that's what we're rolling with. And we want to check if we're colliding with those every frame. So of course that means we need to use event tick. And let's see, where do we want to start with this? What we want to check is the entirety of the character's height worth of collision. So what we're going to add is a multi-box trace for objects. And the reason why we're doing this is so that we can have a box trace. I'll debug and show exactly what this is for in a minute. But yeah, we're checking basically the size of the character the whole way from the camera to the character. Yeah, it'll be a lot clearer when I show you. But what we're going to do is we're going to get the camera. We'll just drag it from here. And we're going to get the world location as the start point for the trace. For the end location, we want to get actor location. And the actor we're checking for is the player character. So get player character. Straighten these up. I hit Q there, by the way, to align all the, or straighten out all the links. And the orientation, we need to get the world location of the camera. World location, world rotation. Not set, get. And the object types that we want to trace for is we want to make array, just so we can get one in here. Our environment collision that we set up beforehand. Now I will debug for 1 frame, which should give us a clue of what's going on. And the half size we're going to set at, let's say, 20 by 20 by 80. That should roughly be the half size of the character itself. If you wanted, you could also do get half size, or get capsule components, and then get the half size of that. Just in case you have other characters, it's generally not a good idea to hard code something in, but yeah, we're going to do that for now here. And once we're doing that, let's actually see what's going on when we trace like this. The reason why we're doing multi-box trace is because we don't want to just get the first hit result. We want to get every hit result in case there's more than one environment actor in the way. And if I go back here, you'll see now that a box appears going from the camera to the character. And it's kind of tracing the exact height of the character. So 20 by 20 by 80 was a kind of very good approximation. And now anything that this touches, we can say is in the way, basically. So now that we've got that, let's go back to the camera. What we want to do with that information is we want to get every hit result into a for each loop, so we're looping on every single one of them. I'll connect this back up in a minute. And we're going to check whether or not this is a room. Oh, sorry, let's break the hit result first. Get the hit actor and cast to room collection, because that's really the only actors here we care about. And if I shrink that back down, it'll still have hit result there. Let's drag everything out a bit further away. And now what we need to do is we want to check if this room collection is a room that's already in our line of sight, or whether we're adding it for the first time. We want to drag in rooms in the way, get rooms in the way, and we're going to add that to it. Sorry, not add, we're wanting to add unique so that we only ever have one instance of the object. And what is this saying on the integer? The index of the newly added item, or index none if the item is already present. So what we want to say is if this is less than 0, basically index none, we are fading the room out. So we want to call on this object reroute, fade room, should fade, yes. Now to explain this a bit better here, the reason why we're adding unique is because we only want one instance of that room in this array at any given time, and we are checking if it's already been added, then we don't need to fade the room again, but if it's added for the first time here, then we should fade the room, because we don't want to be triggering that logic over and over again. And then once we've done that, we want to then check if we need to fade any rooms back in that have been in the way and are no longer in the way. So we want to, after the for each loop is completed, for each loop yet again on the rooms previously in the way to see if they're currently in the way still. We are going to cast to room collection. And as the room collection, we want to find item in an array, and we want to find if it's in rooms in the way. So if it's just been added this frame. And if it's not, i.e. it's not currently in the way, it will be less than 0 again, which we can do a branch check for. And we want to fade the room, off of room collection. Fade room, leaving that false, back in. And now what we want to do is once that's completed, we want to set the previously in the way actors as the currently in the way actors as the previously in the way actors. So this gives us like a repeating update on what actors are in the way and what have just left the range and stuff like that. So we can set rooms previously in the way. I want to set that, not get that. As rooms in the way, and then we want to clear rooms, reorganizing it, clear rooms in the way. Now that was a lot going on, so let's see if this works, and if it doesn't we will go through what's going on. This is a good point, actually. We don't need to cast this because it's already a room collection because it's in the array. So we can remove that and just hook up that to there. Compile and save. And we have an error here because we need to hook that up there. Cool. Let's see what happens now. So this is only going to affect things that are in a room collection. So let's go to room collection. And it's not working. Why is it not working? Well, first of all, one thing that we didn't do in the camera actor is hook this logic back up. What we're going to do here is, just to keep it clear, we're going to do a sequence. So we say, do this logic first, and then do this logic. Let's clean this up a little bit. So, why is that not working? Is our room collections not set to environment? That would probably be it. So we'll go custom on the box collision in the room collection, and the object type we're going to make environment. So compile and save that. And now if we play and head over to where it might get affected, still nothing, but we are now colliding with environments, so that's a good sign. You can see all those hit markers. Now we just need to figure out why it's not fading. Ah, of course, we're checking the wrong way there. If it's greater than 0, we want to fade the room. If it's less than 0, we don't want to do anything. There we go. That's looking much better now. You can see when the actors are in the way, we fade out the entire room. And when they're not in the way, they come back. So let's see what happens if we get kind of in closer and get the character in the room. I'll full screen this. So one thing you'll see that shouldn't be happening is we shouldn't be fading them if we're on the same level, right? We should only be fading them if we're trying to look through something like this. So how do we fix that now? We want to do a height check. So we go back to the camera. And when we're checking the room collection, first of all, let's move that across. We want to say get actor location. And we want to get actor location on the character as well to check if they're on the same kind of plane. Get player character. And if we split both of these so we can get the Z value, because that's all we really care about for now. Z being, of course, the height. We want to minus both of them, and if it's less than, say, minus 400? If it's less than 400, then we want to continue with that logic. I might have got those numbers wrong, but let's see. Yeah, because we're still fading out the room that's on the same level, which we don't want to be doing. So let's just take a look at that math yet again. Okay, there we go. After some trial and error there, I realized I was doing the wrong sign there. So what we want to do is we want to check if the character is on the same level as the room itself, and if the room is above the character by, I've put 300 here, you'll have to define whatever your standard room height is for that value, maybe make a new variable there. But with that in mind, when I hit play now, and I bring my character over to the building, you'll notice that we can still see through onto the bottom floor. However, when we go up, it kind of fades back in. Now, we still need to work on the roof there, but that's working nicely. What I do need to do, though, is I need to add the floor into that second volume. So if I get the room volume, add a new static object, let's just scroll down and select the floor. And then for the roof, maybe we need to reduce this down to 250. Yeah, okay, that's working much nicer now. The roof still kind of fades in a bit less, so let's even reduce this down even further to 200. Cool, that's working much nicer now. So that's basically that. The only other thing I want to add in this video before we go off and do more things is you'll notice when I'm clicking on the ground there, if I go back to it, you'll notice that when I click on the ground, even when it's faded out, I still click on that invisible ground. I just want to stop that. So if I go to my BP environment actor, I'm going to add just a little bit of logic in here to, if I grab the static mesh, set collision response to channel, and we're going to say the channel is visibility, the response is ignore, and then copy and paste that for fading in. We're going to set the new response to block. So that way now, whenever we try and click on the ground underneath the invisible ground, we should be able to do so. So let's see. So we're fading out the room on top, and if I click down there, it is clicking on the room down below very nicely. So that's working out well. And we can still click on the stairs if we want to go upstairs and bring that up. And yeah, nice. Okay, so this episode got a bit messy at the end, but yeah, that's basically all I have to say about that. We'll try and smooth things out before the next episode. But yeah, that's where I'm going to end here. So the next episode, I'm just going to work on a few more quality of life things. For example, we don't really need to fade out environment when we can see the character through the doorway. So we're going to make another bit of logic to just not show that, which will also help with issues like, you know, this here where we can kind of see through that wall when we don't need to. So yeah, I will see you in the next episode.